Hey everybody, welcome back to your Full Tilt podcast. That is Tech Industry Leadership Talks. It's all about leadership, and I'm Dawn Zoldi, one of your co-hosts for this show. Mike Peel is also interviewing people as part of this series, and we are so fortunate to have with us today Ed Boucas, the CEO of Votix. Votix is a brand new startup right out of the gate doing amazing things in drone orchestration for the drone and advanced air mobility industry. And, I met Ed and his team. Actually, I met your team, Ed, at AUVSI Exponential this year, which was their very first show. And I went up to the booth and I said, okay, you guys are new. What are you doing? And it only took a 15-minute conversation for me to realize there's going to be great things going on right here. We had a follow-on call, and here we are. And, as I got to know Ed, and you're going to get to know him today, just this incredible leader, a serial entrepreneur from a very young age. And I'm so excited, Ed, to talk to you today about your background and about your leadership experience, because I feel like so many people can learn from you and your journey. And everybody out there, Ed picked the theme for today of leading ahead of your time startups, because that's been his journey. That's been his life. So Ed, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Don. It's my pleasure to be here and join with you this amazing podcast. And we have been talking lately. We worked together in many events, and I'm so happy. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. And Ed, we're gonna talk about your various companies and your journey along the way. But can we start at the beginning? Like you are a citizen, I believe I heard yesterday on your Women in Drones Coffee Connect session, a citizen of 3 different countries. You've had such an interesting kind of childhood and upbringing. Can you tell us just a little bit about that first?
Yeah, so my family, I come from Italian family, so half of the family came from Spain, the other half came from Italy, and so I have the Italian citizenship. I kept it. So I'm Italian citizenship. I'm Italian citizen. I'm also Brazilian citizen because I was born in Brazil, and then I moved to the U.S. and now I'm also a U.S. citizen. So I have 3 passports. I have 3 citizenships. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I know yesterday or recently on the Women in Drones session, you talked quite a bit about how the women in your life, your mother, and now of course your sisters, and then your wife and daughter, have really kind of shaped who you are as a person. I don't know if you want to kind of touch that just briefly
Yeah,
before we
I
get
come
a
from
little
I
bit
come
into your education.
Yeah, I come from Italian family because my mom came from Italian family. My grandparents and my mom's side are Italian. So we have a very strong. All women in my life have very strong character, and they really are the main pillar of my family. From now in my house right now, my wife, and that was my mom and my grandmother. They were very strong women, and I have a huge admiration for them. So they play a very important role in my life, and I have yesterday was a little emotional. You remember that,
I
and I will
do.
get emotional if I go through this. So they're very important to me for sure.
Well, and clearly education has been a big part of your experience. And Ed, I think you'll agree that as we look at these great leaders out there, in the world, they're lifelong learners. And I assume that started at an early age. And we just saw a picture of you in high school. I love that picture. So tell us a little bit about your educational journey and how that has shaped, your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, so I was born in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Again, 45 years ago, 1977, and I was in Rio. And when one thing, of course, I come from a middle class family in Brazil, but I always had big dreams. And my father spent most of his money and the time with the kids. We are 4 siblings, right? My parents, they have 4 kids in education. So I was fortunate to study in the best schools and best universities. And when I was 16 years old, I came to the U.S., to Houston, to the Woodlands, by the way, where we did the
Oh, at the Energy Drone
drone summit.
Robotics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to study, and I did my last year of high school in the Woodlands in Houston, and that was a picture in my graduation. So when I came back, well, I was 17 years old in that picture, and that was starting my international journey, like living US, very like talking about 1993 to 1994. So the
Wow.
world was not as globalized as is right now. I remember I was the only foreigner in my school, and was very the Woodlands was a very traditional city, even more in that point as well, and I started there. And when I was very young, when 22 years old, what you just said, because one of the things we're discussing before is, okay, and you're going to come up with that in our agenda is like, hey, and I don't want to spoil, but hey, how is your, what was your best boss in your life? I never had a boss because I once I graduated from engineering school when I was 22 years old, the first thing I did was to start Cypher. And you're talking about end of 1999. In the end of 1999, remember, internet became commercial in 95.
Wow.
iPhone, which is the real first smartphone, was launching in 2007. You're talking
Yep.
about almost 7, 8 years before any smartphones being there. Only 4 years after internet became commercial, which at that point was very early stage. Just remember, like time frame, we're talking about PayPal really became PayPal in 2001. So that's very early stage there. And I have my vision that of course for me was obvious that internet will become what became now, and technology will evolve that way. And at that point, I was thinking, hey, if internet is becoming important, and I believe that e-commerce is also will be important, and that was my picture when I started Cypher when I was 22 years old, and look very different. I tried to look very serious because I was only 22 years old starting a company, a tech company.
Yep.
So I had to make myself very serious. Even the glass was like a creating a character there. And
I
so
love that.
so you're talking about very early stage of tech and super early stage for cybersecurity. And the vision that I had was, okay, if that thing is happening and transactions are going to be done
Yep.
um, in the internet, and e-commerce should be a reality soon,
Right.
cybersecurity will be a big thing. And I remember going to like credit card, huge, I don't want to mention names here, but to huge credit card companies like the big credit card brands, and going to a lot huge companies like retailers and all this, and they say, no, we don't believe in e-commerce, that won't happen, how can you do that? I don't think that's the future. And now you see Amazon like worth more than Walmart, right? So
Yep.
so and in my vision that I had was like, okay, if that thing's becoming big, they have to protect it because the data will be decentralized, it'll be all over the place, you have to control that. And that was when I started Cypher with the idea of creating one of the first cybersecurity companies there. And thanks God, we went along the way and became one of the largest companies in the world in 25 countries. We were acquired by this huge public traded European $5 billion company and all this. So.
Yeah, so I want to peel it back a little bit, Ed, because I mean, I really want to emphasize this because it is a leadership podcast. And most kids that are like in high school or just graduating college aren't thinking, you know, I'm gonna create my own company, so what what like inspired you to do that? Because most college kids, especially in the 1990s, I mean, I'm a little older than you, Ed. I grew up more in the 80s, right? Law school for me was in the 90s. Even so, it was like, where's the next party? And oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm a history major. What do I do with that? Okay, I'll go to law school. And it's like after law school, it's like, now what? Because frankly, law school gives you zero practical training. And, um, there you were in Texas, kind of fresh out of Brazil. First of all, what college did you go to, and weren't you an engineering
Yeah,
major?
I'm a mechanical and production engineering, so I have both. And I did in the best, like one of the top three engineering schools in Brazil, because then I left when I finished my high school in the U.S. After spending the senior year and graduating from the high school in the Woodlands. I came back to Brazil and I did my graduation there, which is very good. Later in my life, we can go through this. I did my OPM program in Harvard, so I became alumni from Harvard as well after 3 years studying there. But back then was what I thought at that point that was I was supposed to, because again my visa was limited. I would have to come back anyways. But I did there, and when I started Cypher, I remember the first thing in my mind was, okay, Rio's too little. I always believe that technology is portable, right? I don't
Yeah.
believe in technology that should be applied to a specific territory, unless you're talking about super, like specific financial accountability that a certain country has special taxation, processes, and you need to do something very tailor-made to that country. I believe that technology should be portable, should be universal, and that was my belief since I started Cypher. So my first opportunity that I had, I moved myself. The company was still young. We didn't have any investors. Because remember one thing, you're talking about early 2000, and it, even it started in 1999, but really from the company in early 2000. Early 2000, Brazil was not close to what it is right now, even though it's still not, of course, close to the US, but it's better than before in terms of global relevance. And back then, as you kind of mentioning, the whole dream was, oh, I want to work for this big multinational company, this big company, and create a career there. And that was the mojo. Like that was.
So that was your goal.
No, that was not my goal at all. That's why I didn't go there, because I received offers when I graduated from engineering to join those companies, but I could
You
never
did.
imagine. Yeah, I did, but I never.
So what? So why? Like, why did you not imagine yourself? Like, what about your background, or what about your, your growing up led you to think, I'm not going to work for these big companies. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not going to have a boss.
I don't know, because I never had a boss, and in my mind, I was like, I like to create. I'm a very creative guy, and I'm very good on risk taking, and I'm a very optimistic guy. I think any entrepreneur has to be optimistic by nature, right? So I'm strange enough, I never see something fail. I always see that thing going well and succeeding. So my mindset is always positive. That thing will work. So I'm very positive thinking. I'm very, I guess, optimistic, and I really trust on myself. And I couldn't see myself being a number on a badge and just working in a huge company, being another guy. And I want to create something that would really make a difference and really create something out of zero. And I remember when I started cybersecurity, it was very hard. And that's one of the points that you mentioned before. That's the most of the struggle in entrepreneurs, and the major challenge is that when you try to create a breakthrough or create something new, you might have a great idea, and that thing might even happen at some point, but you might be too early because your vision might be very strong. But when you have a vision, you have like a time frame of like 5 to 10 or maybe 20 years for that to happen. You don't control the factors, right? So even if you look back to Amazon really created this monster company, like after like Amazon was created, I guess 1994, 95, but that became a reality for them like 10 years later, and they have to survive through that time. So sometimes you have an amazing idea, it might be even good execution, but might be ahead of time. So the customers, they're not willing to buy that yet, even though they need it, because for some reason they don't see the need at that point. But you know that that's going to happen. That's for sure in your mind. But are you going to survive 5 years until that happens? So you have to be you have to know how to manage as well. So one thing is strategy. There are things execution. I think you have to balance your execution pretty well to make sure that you survive and you don't die before the time that adoption will happen.
Well, let's talk about that, because, as you alluded to, cybersecurity back in the late 1990s, like essentially right after the internet, became a real thing for many people. That was ahead of its time. And I know this is why you picked the theme. You were not only leading an ahead of its time company and idea, but you were doing it at 22 years of age. And I imagine there's related but different challenges as a young entrepreneur in an ahead of its time, company and idea. So let's walk through first just your youth. Like, what challenges did you face being 22 years old? I mean, you just said, I put on the glasses, cut my hair, and wore a tie because I was trying to create an image. But it makes sense, right? Because you want to be taken seriously as a 22-year-old. What challenges did you face just from your youth alone?
Yeah, right now, if you look into how organized the venture capital market is, you have like the angel investors, you have the seed money, you have the angel investors, you have early stage venture capital funds, and then you have late stage venture capital funds, and then you have private equity funds, then you can go through IPO or whatever, right? But remember, like I talk about early 2000 in Brazil, in Rio specifically, right? So there was like very high interest rates, so you could not leverage. You're not a small company like a company that was just being created. There's no access to money in terms of leveraging and getting any loans or anything like that, for two reasons: because I didn't have any collateral to give, and also because interest rates were impossible. to survive with them. And also there was no organized market, mostly in Brazil or even in US, as it is right now, in terms of available money to invest in early stage companies. There are not many great success cases. And remember, the bubble of internet like blew like in 2001, right?
Right,
And
right.
then scarcity of money was even bigger, right? So I have to bootstrap and to be cash flow positive from the beginning because I had to survive out of that. And I remember like very early stage, I come from a middle class family, so I didn't have any help from anyone. And I remember like being very humble, and I have to be very charming as well to date women because they have to pay my bill, right? So if I would have, I'm just kidding. So that was the reality. And but I was very, and the thing is, you have to persist as well. So I think I did pretty well. Like, thanks God, my history was creating this amazing company, became with presence right now in 25. When I sold the company, I had presence in 15 countries. Like
Wow.
became the division of this huge public traded company with 160,000 employees. The public traded company that bought my company, and
Wow.
and they chose my company all over the world to become their top three. The Prosegur is one of the three largest private security companies in the world. So they've
But
chosen my
Ed,
company.
I wanted to ask you because you said, this idea of ahead of its time, and there's always a window. And there you were, 22 years old, knocking on big credit card companies' doors saying, hey, cybersecurity, it's a thing, it's important, you should hire me. And, some doors were slammed in your face initially, but as you said, at the end of the day, hugely successful, like wildly successful. So what lead turn, like how did you pierce that bubble of this whole I'm ahead of my time? How did you convince people that cybersecurity was a critical thing that they needed to have in their companies to become such, to have your cypher become so successful?
Yeah, I think that the way we went to market back then was doing what we call penetration testing, which is simulation of attack to show them, hey, you really have a problem there, even though we acknowledge that you're open. So part of the sales process was also to show the customer that thing is a reality and they could face problems of that, and also showing them also that it was better to do with us. So we created, just after I launched the company, we created one of the first security operation centers in the world, which is now when we say, for example, Cypher became a huge managed security service company, or and also MDR company, managed detection response company, which is remote service provided by a SOC, a security operations center. So now we have like 6 SOCs all over the world, and
Wow.
covering all these countries and all this. But back then we created this concept that say, hey, it's very complex to use, so you don't have to do yourself. We are creating this 24/7 operating center that we're going to manage those devices to you, and also going to monitor you against any type of attack and threat and any risk, cyber risk or cyber fraud, and we're going to do that for you. And so we start with the new concept that, first of all, you have a problem, even though you're not aware of that. So we have to educate the market, and you're really creating some assessments that will show them that. And at the same time, we are creating something that was good for them as a value added, because they didn't have to hire those difficult things they didn't understand about it, just like I see drone right now. So the customers, they don't understand that new animal that's coming in. And so we say, okay, don't worry about it. We do that for you, and we do it cheaper because we have a shared services remotely provided to you, and a lot of technology, because the way we escalate our business is doing technology. And that comes the concept of orchestration. Back then, I was doing orchestration back then, which is pretty much telling the customer, hey, you have a lot of moving parts, a lot of devices, a lot of feeds coming from different places, and a huge big data, and you have to organize this big data and understanding with intelligence what really matters and what doesn't matter, and take actions on top of intelligence that you create through this data, right? So we are applying this concept in cybersecurity long ago, like 20 years ago, very successfully. And then we created pretty much one of the first managed security service companies in the world. We start growing on that, ensuring the customers, hey, Mr. Customer, you are now starting to work 24/7, because then the time was passing by, and the adoption of IT and internet became a reality. And then they say, okay, so now before I was selling tickets of an airline company, was a big example because it was our first big client. And then they opened, and before they were selling tickets through agencies, through travel agencies, right? And then they said, okay, now I can sell direct to consumer through the internet, right? So now they're selling 24/7. Before, they're not selling 24/7. So now the system is 24/7. So if your system is 24/7, you should have a 24/7 protection as well. And now, since people are accessing your systems and data anywhere in the world, and with a lower control that agencies that you have to have a better layer of authentication, of certification, of security, and all this. So we're just offering that to them as a service. So we had our technology that better does the orchestration, automation of this process, understanding data correlation. So we do log correlation, event correlation to get better insight. So instead of, because at some point we're managing 1 billion events, which 1 billion logs a day.
Oh my gosh. And Ed, there's so much to talk about. We could talk about Cypher all day long, but you also created Blockbit. And so I want to transition to that. But before I do, I want to just highlight something you said, just make sure people didn't miss out on this, because, so many times we talk about companies creating a solution, looking for a problem. You clearly had the problem statement in your mind when you created Cypher, and the solution followed quickly. And then it was a matter of convincing people, again, ahead of your time, and before they even realized they had the problem, that they had the problem, and you've got the solution. And so again, just to reemphasize, we're talking about 2 rounds of multi-million-dollar equity investments that Ed led, a $5 billion European publicly traded company that ultimately bought out Cypher and kept Ed on as CEO for 3 years, even after that purchase. And then you create Blockbit. So let's talk about Blockbit, because here you are again, kind of ahead of your time as an entrepreneur, creating this company. And I love this picture, Ed. I know this is your wife and your 2 sisters here in this picture with you. Tell us a little bit about Blockbit, what it was, and why you created it.
So Blockbit was even before I already had investments at Cypher. And we were very well positioned in the world as a leading company in managed security services and managed detection response. And you look into Gartner, which is the main research institute for IT in the world, and they segregate pretty well cybersecurity in 2 different, I call animals, right? You have the service companies and they have the product companies. And even though we had a lot of technology, we are providing our technology as a service, as a subscription, even before the idea of SaaS existing. MSS is the initial phase of SaaS. So we are like providing as a service all this technology, but providing the full solution to the customer. And at some point, I saw, hey, I believe in cybersecurity so much that I also want to be position myself in the product side, which is pretty much only focused on the product licensing and creating the technology, so I can even license that to Cypher or to anyone else. And then we created Blockbit, which was very early stage of cloud security. So I talking about cloud edge security, created the concept of cloud security in 2015, and the idea came in 2014 until we assessed acquisition. We did all the process of diligence and due diligence and buying the company. That was end of 15, and we really reshaped it, because what would happen was, we had 2 options. Either we would create the technology, but it would take 3 to 5 years to do that, or we would buy an existing company and just turn that around completely. So we bought a company that we believe the technology was very good, but the way the go-to-market strategy was not there yet. I don't know, they were not performing as well as they should, having the technology they had, right? So they're going sideways. So we just pretty much bought the whole company, but we kept the technology. We hired new people. We hired a new leadership team. We changed the go-to-market strategy. We changed even we rebranded the whole company as well. And instead of going direct as they were doing, we created a whole channel program and going indirect. So we came from 100% of direct sales to next year selling 100% through partners. So that way we have more capillarity. We have a bigger reach in the global market as well. So we changed the whole business model. We changed the team. We changed the brand. We changed even offices and all this. And we created a very early stage, a cloud edge security company, which right now you see Cloudflare, you see our competitors there as a big company as Blockbit is. And we did pretty well on that. And that was why I was running Cypher, but it was kind of an investment that I did. I was a chairman, and I hired a full-time executive team there, amazing team, and they run the company. And we kept it totally separate because I saw value in both companies. I remember when I did acquisition, and then one of our private equities joined the company and said, hey, why don't you, there are 2 cybersecurity companies, why don't you just merge them? I said, man, if I merge them, is 1 + 1 is 1.5. Keeping them separately is 1 + 1 is equal to 2.5. So keeping them separately is more valuable than integrating them And I remember a lot of people saying, but you shouldn't do that. And at the end was proven right, that keeping them separate was much more valuable. And we made a huge shine as well to show the market that they were fully independent companies. And when we sold Cypher, was very clear to them as well, to the process that bought the company, that Cypher has nothing to do with Blockbit, even though they are cybersecurity company, but they are positioned very differently. They could complement each other if they want to be partners, but they don't have to be partners. So by doing so, we multiplied investment, and the company, just to give an idea, in 5 years after acquisition, which we bought the company, we pretty much launched it in 5 years, the company grew 10 times, 10x, 1,000%.
And which company, Cypher or Blockbit or both?
No, Blockbit. Cypher was growing year over year.
Yeah.
So if you look back, Cypher, we had a managed number at Cypher, which is, if you look into your bottom line plus the growth, should be 50% plus. So which means that if I go 40%, I should have a 10% bottom line. If I go 30%, I should have a 20% bottom line. If I go 50%, I'm willing to give away profitability to grow. So that was a 50% rule. And we kept this 50% rule for decades, which is, again, to be a good entrepreneur as well, you have to be very diligent and you have to be consistent. So
this is perfect, because that's what I wanted to ask you, Ed. You know, we're focused on leadership here. You're leading. I mean, gosh, you were like simultaneously leading two incredible companies ahead of their time. So what leadership lessons did you pull from that experience? Like, in other words, if you're talking to this audience now, let's just say there's an audience full of new entrepreneurs, people like you that have big dreams and don't want to have a boss telling them what to do. What is one thing you would tell them just right off the bat from those experiences? Like, what is one key lesson?
Yeah, from the beginning, I always had very clear in my mind, even though early ages, I'm a frugal guy by nature. I have my expensive toys and I have a good life for sure, but I'm frugal in the business side and also in my personal life, but mostly in the business side. And from the beginning, for me, it was very clear. The company has to make sense, right? Your pricing has to make sense. Your gross margin must make sense. You can play with the G&A to see if you're going to sell more. As G&A, if you're going to sell more or less, spending more marketing dollars or sales dollars, and then you adjust your EBITDA based on your growth. But you have to be very consistent on your pricing has to make sense. Your business must make sense as well. Because if your business doesn't make sense and you're burning cash like crazy and it's not making sense, your boss is going to be your CFO. Your boss is going to be your investors, and you don't have any way of really implementing your vision. So and if you see right now the adjustments that just happened right now in the financial market, and you see like tech companies in growth, like going down from 70 to 90%, depending on the small cap even going down 90%, 70%, 80%, and the average even big tech companies going down 30, 40%. It's very clear that now they understand that it's not about having a crazy idea, burning cash like crazy. The business has to make sense somehow. It has to be sustainable. So this idea of being sustainable, even though both of my companies and all my companies that I manage, they grew very fast. They're growing like 40, 50%, 30% year over year. I was growing year over year from 40 to 50%. Even Blockbit grew at some point 70%, 80%. And in great years, we doubled the size. So we have been growing average 40% year over year in every company I've managed, which is high growth. It's still high growth, but sustainable. So your pricing has to make sense, and your business must make sense to be able to control your company. Because if you don't do that, you don't control your company. It means that you're going to have to go through so many rounds of investments and so dependent on the next round that if any little thing goes wrong that maybe is outside of your control, you lose your company, or you're going to be fired as a CEO of your own company, or you're going to be in the hands of investors, or you're going to be in the hands of your CFO. So, and you need time to implement your vision. Because, for example, Cypher, the vision was like 5 to 10 years ahead. It was an amazing vision. We had the first move advantage, and I became a very wealthy guy by selling the company, and I'm very happy now with my path. But if I wasn't thinking like that in the beginning, I wouldn't survive the first 5 years, because the market was really buying cybersecurity, stopped buying cybersecurity in 2005. So at the beginning, I had to educate the market and survive for 5 years with my own means, by making the company make sense from the beginning. So my advice is that be careful, because most of the good examples of growth companies that did well, You have one good example, but you have 100 bad examples, right? So you have to be careful. You have to seek to growth, because growth means that the market is willing to buy from you. You show adoption, right? You show that that your technology is being adopted, right? And people like it. I think that's a very good indication for you as a business. But at the same time, it has to make sense.
Well, Ed, it's a great transition to Votix because, like I said in the very beginning of our talk here, when I went up to that booth at AUVSI and I saw Votix and I said, "What are you all doing?" And I believe it was Edwin Sanchez, who was your partner in this, who said to me, "We're doing drone orchestration." And I said, tell me about that, because it's not a term I had heard before, and I've been around the block in this industry. And when he explained it to me, and after we met, I knew that this was going to be a thing. This was going to be huge. And Ed, time is flying here, and I want to talk a little bit about balance and leading others and get to our lightning round. So I want to roll a couple pictures here of you with Votix. I want you to give me the no kidding 30-second elevator speech on Votix, only because, as a teaser to everybody out there, stay tuned. Next month, we are going to do a very special stream just with Votix about what they are doing and what drone orchestration is. So we're gonna throw that out there, and y'all can come back for more. We're gonna spend just a smidge of time right now talking about what Votix is and what it's doing. And then we're going to end with really strong with some of this stuff about balance in your life, because I can't even imagine having balance with managing these multi-million-dollar companies, especially simultaneously. And then, having kids in the midst of all of that. So we're going to get to that. Tell us about Votix. 30 seconds, go.
So Votix is a drone orchestration company. So we create the concept of organizing all these moving parts. So in a drone ecosystem, you have many moving parts, from corporate systems, from traffic control systems, from collision avoidance systems, from drone-in-a-box solutions, from weather and all this. And all those are very complex for you to manage and be able to fly, right? Even more if you want to fly BVLOS or you want to fly multiple, you want to scale your business. So you have to organize all this data. They have to be connected. They have to be easy to use and transparent to the final user. So what we did to create a very nice technology that we have been developing for 4 years, which is amazing. So makes your drone operation easy. What we do is we make your life easy. You can produce, you can have better productivity, you can have better insights, better intelligence, you can control your performance. And that's what we do. We organize all these moving parts into something very simple that can scale your business.
Well, again, go to the website. It's Votix. Is it .com, Ed?
.com, Votix.com.
Okay, Votix.com, and check it out. Like I said, more to follow. Follow Ed, by the way. Follow him on LinkedIn. Follow Votix's website, and follow us, of course, here on the fullcrew.io. We have a subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button, and you will get the notifications also if you hit the little bell in the future, because we have incredible leaders like Ed lined up for months on end talking about their journeys, and also our newscast Full Crew. But Ed, let's talk about balance, because this is one of those things that I think leaders, entrepreneurs, this is such a hard thing to achieve balance in one's life. And we've had some interesting comments from our other guests. General Paz was on, and we had Ramon Roche. You are going to be our third Full Tilt guest, Ed. What are your thoughts on balance? Have you gotten that down? Do you have any tips for people? Or if you haven't, what would you look back and say, gee, I wish I had done X instead?
I think balance is not a word that describes me pretty well. I'm a very intense guy, so I'm not a balanced guy at all. I think I'm very tense. And what happened to my life, honestly, I was fully committed to my ventures, and I created these 2 amazing companies, which made me very wealthy. And that was my focus, not even being wealthy, but creating something that was big and growing that and selling it. Because even though I love it, I believe that the best come out would be, hey, I did it and I sold it, right? I did it and somebody saw the value and paid a high price for that. So that for me was the final crown, the final results, right? That I was looking for. So balance is not how you describe me pretty well, but to your point, my life is much more balanced now than it was before. I think then when you achieve because first you have to hustle. There's no other way. You have to work hard, working a strategy. Of course, you cannot change the strategy all the time because that's something wrong, right? The strategy should be something that should survive a little longer, even though you have to change it if it's not working quickly. But the execution is something you change more. You have to review your strategy from time to time, but your execution have to be reviewing all the time because that's where most people fail, executing that. So I was fully engaged. And talking about balance, I became a father when I was 40 years old. No, 40 years old. Yeah, Nicholas was born 2017, which is my first son, and I postponed that moment because I knew I was ready before. I didn't have the time at all to dedicate to them. Which thanks God, right now I have more because I already had beautiful exits and all this. So now I thought everything ended up pretty well in my life. And I end up being a father later than normal. And I love it because right now I can spend a lot of time with them. I can just get my boat, go to Bahamas with the family from time to time and spend some quality time, which before I would never be able to do that. We travel a lot as a family. And I never, like I was so intense on the road. At some point in my career, I was traveling international every week or every other week, international.
Wow.
Like
Yikes.
international because we were running so many countries that I had to be there, a lot in Europe, a lot of in US and all this. So even Latin America as well, for sure. So I was traveling all over the world. It would be very hard to raise the kids like that. And I kind of postponed that until the moment I thought that I was ready for that. So it was a decision which I don't regret at all. I think was amazing because right now my relationship with my kids, the way I'm being able to grow them is the right timing. I couldn't have done it before. So I think it's better for them even than for me, right? But I think most of the entrepreneurs, they're not very well balanced. I'll be honest with you. They're very intense. They're
Yeah.
very, they're very driven. They want to make it happen. They will go and make it happen, regardless
Yeah.
of the situations. They will overpass hard times and make it bad times into good times, bad times into opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And Votix like that. So when Votix came to me, I was introduced to Edwin 2 years ago, and I was still in my times ending my period at because when I sold Cypher, they locked me up for 3 years as a CEO of the business, driving that public traded company and growing and flying all over the world and growing the business. And but I met him in the sense of to mentor him in this project, including Votix, which had a different name and but a great technology. And then I started talking to him during 2 years. And when my time was over at Cypher, I didn't want to continue because again, it was very hard for me to transition from entrepreneur into a CEO of a public traded company, right? A big division of public traded companies, a different animal. Most
Right.
people love it. I didn't like. I know I'm talking public here, but I didn't love it because it was not the way I am. It's not how I'm driven, you know. So I had even an easier life because I have so many people that could be working for me and huge thing that was going on and the company was going by itself at some point. So, but that's all I like challenges. So, and when I met him, we spoke about some project, including Votix, and I said, no, the other ones is not my profile, but this one I love it. I see as a huge value. And then we start talking about the concept and creating and bringing that concept of IT, of orchestration that I've been doing for so long, for so many years, to the drone industry. And using that
Yes.
amazing technology that have been developing for 4 years. At that point, it was being developed for 2 years. We adapted that to the new concept. And we kept talking as a mentor and as a possible investor. I was talking to him. And when the time is over at Cypher, the first thing we did, let's sit down. Like, why don't you join? And we say, hey, why don't you join as a CEO? Let's found the company together because the company didn't really have, was just a technology being developed. So let's
Yep.
found the company together. Now we're at the point of launching it. And with your experience, with your managerial abilities in driving startups to success, selling companies, getting investors, and managing and having a vision and executing that. So let's work together. So we partner into this amazing company, Votix, implemented the vision, which is drone orchestration. And also we did another thing was amazing, which is we have such a big platform that we developed for 4 years. We broke it down in 3 products that can pretty much be adopted by any type of drone program. You can be one pilot or you can be a huge organization. The way we broke down manage, stream, and fly was brilliant.
Yep.
In the sense that we can be in any phase of any company that will be helping them.
I know. And we are definitely going to be talking about that exclusively in our next stream. So we have about 5 minutes left, Ed, and I really want to do almost what I'll call a lightning round with you. kind of taking this back to leadership, because I just heard you say you mentored Edwin, you know, when you were not locked up any longer with Cypher, you sat down, you're now the CEO of Votix. You've had this incredible journey and experience as an entrepreneur and a human. Let me ask you this. I just listening to you, I don't know enough about your background to fully appreciate this idea of nature versus nurture. You know, are leaders born? Are they shaped so much by their environment that they become a leader? I feel like just listening to you, there's a lot of nature in there. Like you were kind of a born leader. I don't know. My guess is throughout school and throughout your life, you were leading things, whether you realized it or not. What is your take on the nature nurture debate? I mean, this has been 1,000+ year debate. What are your thoughts there?
I think that nature plays maybe a more important role because you go through so many difficulties and so many doors that are shut that if you're not born as a very strong guy with a very strong and you don't believe in yourself, right? You have to be very very secure by yourself, by your vision. You have to be very you have to be very persistent and resilient, right? So I think that's kind of some of the hard characters, right? That I think you pretty much you can of course forge that to time, but it's so extreme on that you have to have this nature thing. And I remember I was a little kid, like 10 years old, and I had this little allowance to spend money. And I was like my siblings, they would spend all their monies, and I would borrow them with interest. Like at 10 years old, I remember like little papers they signed it, and I kept in my wallet, and I was
Oh my gosh.
And I remember, and at that time I used to go to school. It was in a private transportation, public transportation. I was negotiating with the lady not to pay because at that time you would pay it. Because it was private education, was on public, so you have to pay. I was negotiating not to pay, to go under, and then I was saving that money. I didn't eat at school to save the money as well and to be able to spend on something else. Funny. So I think that's, and I think the frugality and the fact that I deal well with money and managing that helped me a lot. If you don't, and if you're an entrepreneur, you don't do that, make sure you have amazing CFO next to you. That will make a huge difference. At the end of the day, it's all about.
Yeah, CFO. Well, it's fun. So you just kind of argued your nature point, because it sounds like your brothers and sisters didn't have this ability and they're borrowing money from you. That's just hilarious. Thank you for sharing that story.
No,
so
and going to the blood thing as well. Sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you have too much time, but my brother ended up being entrepreneur successful one as well. My father is an entrepreneur, and that's an interesting story that we can go over another day. But my great uncle, which is the firstborn of my family when they moved to Spain to Brazil, he was the one that brought IBM to Brazil. It was the first operation of IBM outside of Brazil. And the interesting story is that 1917, during First World War, he got into a ship. He spent like 18 days in a ship to get into the US to convince the founder of IBM, Thomas Watson, to give him the license to open IBM in Brazil and all this. So like he was like very humble, went all the way there to do it, like 18 hours. He didn't know, there's no phone call before, there's no telephone.
Yeah.
And just
well, so clearly it's in your, as you say, this is in your blood, being an entrepreneur, and the fact that your brother is one now too. We literally have 1 minute left, so this is going to be a super fast lightning round. And so real quick, we're not going to be able to get into too much discussion, but I asked everybody the same 3 questions at the very end. So here we go. Ready?
Right.
What's your favorite book?
Man, there's one from the 3G guys that bought AB InBev, is a Brazilian entrepreneurs that now is owners of Budweiser and InBev, which is great. It's the best book ever, like a great. I can give it later. It's like great. Man, I really forgot. It's an amazing book about the story of those guys that used to be bankers in Brazil and they became controlling AB InBev, Heinz, Burger King, and those are 3 Brazilian guys born in Brazil that did all that. And
so it's like a biopic, like an explanation of their life. Okay, well, we'll definitely.
And now they control Budweiser, they control InBev, they control like the whole beer industry and consumer industry with Heinz and Burger King and all this. So
Wow, we're definitely gonna drop that in the chat. Certainly. All right. So, who's your hero?
My hero. I really don't have a hero. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. I don't like to put people in different pedestals. I think everybody's human, and I don't know. I have a hard time to answer that. Nope.
Wow, interesting. Well, I honestly, I think that's the first time I asked someone that question and they didn't, even just one from a book or, fictional superhero. All right, that was the very first time, and there's a first time for everything. So, Ed, they broke the mold with you. You are so unique. Last one. What is one thing you want to leave with others in closing?
I think that it's all about, again, make something make sense. Don't be an entrepreneur just because you think it's nice. It has to be something you believe. You have to believe on it. You have to persist. You have to create something that is sustainable. And as you said, you have to must have a need there.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us here today, Ed. I can't wait to see what Votix does because I know it's going to be ginormous. In very short order, I'm already seeing the snowball effect happening. So thank you for sharing a little bit about your life and leadership with us here today. And we all look forward to watching you and watching the Votix team grow. So that's all she wrote, everybody. We are out here. Thank you.